Hello. I am so excited to welcome you here to this panel conversation. My name is Monica Kang. I'm the founder and CEO of InnovatorsBox, where we rethink culture and leadership development. And man, can I just say this is going to be such a treat to have these four wonderful leaders who have not only been trailblazers and real influencers in each of their industries, but really thinking about people, culture, all the time, not just this year, not just last year, but the past 20, 30 years. And it is going to be a rare moment that we can really dive in and ask the hard questions. And so, again, please take a moment to look at their bios. I'm really excited because these particular industries, just to give you a little hint, have been heavily impacted. I know we have all been shifted in the way we have to work during the pandemic, but these particular industries and the way these four leaders had to think about has radically shifted. And so we're in for a treat. Cannot wait to hear what we're about to learn. How we rethink about the culture when everything is now online and things are constantly shifting. And so really excited to welcome our four panelists. We have Ann Powell, Chief Human Resource Officer at Bristol Myers Squibb. If you can wave, hello. Deeanne King, Chief Human Resource Officer at T-Mobile USA, and Tanya Golesic, Chief Executive Officer at Mackage, and then Arch Singh, Chief People Officer at Expedia Group. I mean, just look at the titles, but don't let that, forget the industry experience that they carry to be here. And so I'm super pumped. I get to have a little fan moment as somebody who gets to work on culture, leadership, and people development. So with that, let me just dive in. There's so much we got to learn into. And Powell, if it's okay with you, I would love to kickstart with you, which is let's get down to the bottom. I think we talk about culture, people all the time, but let's be honest, why is that really important? And actually, as a business person, like how does it actually really help make decisions? Like I heard you actually really rely on your culture and people values to make a really key decision and throughout this all changes and unrest as well, please.
Yeah, thanks, Monica, and hi, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here today. Um, Culture is just so competitive, so important to companies, and our values, I believe, are really just the foundation for our culture and the identity of our company. We're in the healthcare business. We're a pharmaceutical company, and innovative science is the core of who we are, what we do. We believe that healthcare needs to work for all of us. There's no one company that can do it alone. It's bigger than BMS. It's bigger than our industry. And so how do we use values to drive alignment to our mission? When we say, Monica, that healthcare needs to work for all, it means that we have to ensure, for example, that our clinical trials are more diverse. Today, about 80% of clinical trials are white. And what that means is they're not reflecting the people impacted by the diseases that we're studying. And so how do our values transcend? Well, internally, you guys probably have them as well. We have people in business resource groups. Sometimes they're called ERGs. And they've been at BMS for about 20 years now. And our own ERG, the Black ERG, came to us and they knocked on the door and they said, we need to think bigger. Like, this isn't cutting it. And they said, let us bring the patient voice to you. Let us tell you why these clinical trials are so white. And essentially, they provided that voice of the patient through their experiences over the last 18 months on nearly 50 clinical protocols and interventions on how we do clinical trials. And so we said, did it help? Well, I can tell you, we did a pilot with what they shared with us. And we did the pilot on prostate cancer. And you may or may not know that the incident rate for prostate cancer is about 60% higher in Black men than white. And so in this clinical trial that we conducted, this pilot, we went from the US average, which is about 4% Black participation of patients enrolled, to about 18%. So how did our values drive that? Patient focus, urgency, accountability. Our culture we've been building for years. It allowed that people in business resource group, that Black resource group, to have the courage to be bold, to speak their minds, to say we need to do it better, and to engage there. And that's how values bring culture to life and drive impact.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I heard also you had to make decisions recently, especially with the Delta variant as well. Would you be willing to share that decision making?
Absolutely. We have been, again, like many of you, that's not unique to BMS, but we have throughout the pandemic, the last 18 months, had to make some tough decisions. We're leading through a time of uncertainty and ambiguity. And, we've not done this before. And, we share that. We're very transparent with what we know and what we're learning and helping our organization know that right now, this is what we're deciding, or we don't know yet, but we'll get back to you at this point in time. Recently, we did take a decision and communicated a decision as soon as we made it, which is part of our transparency value, to our workforce that we were going to mandate vaccination as a condition of continued employment. And we relied on our value set to make that decision because it's very complicated and there are significant impacts. And we know that everyone's lives and beliefs are different. We listened to that and we took that input in. But we believed, aligned with our mission, that we have a responsibility to continue to have a workforce that is safe, that can come into our organization and produce medicines, or at the bench, innovate transformative medicines for patients. And using that as a driver, our mission, underlined by our values, helped us get to this difficult but the right decision for us.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that story. And again, the reminder that any of this, I think in hindsight, it feels like, wait, maybe that was easy, but it's not. Every single moment, and I think throughout this entire time, you're reminding us that this is why culture and people matters. But Arch, we got to check in with you as well because, hey, travel industry has been heavily impacted. As somebody who used to sign all the time too, I mean, and travel every week, this is huge. And so tell me a little bit more. The way we work and travel and live has radically changed. I can only imagine how many other changes that you've had to go through. And I heard from the little work that you've also had to make a key decision earlier this year that hey, we might need to take a revisit to our values and how we redefine how we bring together. So please tell me a little bit more on that. How did that decision making process go, and why did you do that? You didn't have to.
Thank you, Monica, and I'm delighted to join this. And for sure, I think when we think about the last couple of years and the impact on travel, we used this moment to confirm, reaffirm, and galvanize our organization around our worldview. So travel is a force of good, and our mission is to power global travel for everyone, everywhere. And this particular effort was really to kind of use this moment to say, how do we lean into what is good about travel and prepare the organization for travelers and to serve travelers overall? So our values got reshaped around our purpose. And as we think about our purpose, it is really to strengthen connections, bridge divides, and broaden horizons. And so the meaning of travel and the meaning of our purpose was really a galvanizing force for us to think about how we prepare ourselves to be stronger as we come out of it. We redefined our values also as part of it. Some were more confirming what we had. Some we are using to kind of inform our tomorrow. So values like go get what's next and include consciously. And I loved when Anne shared how the IBGs or ERGs have shaped some of the thinking. For us, creating accessibility in travel for different identities, etc. So our IBGs are actively participating on both sides of the equation. How our products show up for travelers, and how do we access talent and be relevant for different constituents and different identities, and be a place that we want to all kinds of diverse talent pools to flourish. So this last year, I think when we think about the way our values have shaped and the way our work is now getting more and more integrated and thinking about traveler at the core of it, and our values enabling us to consciously make choices and force simplicity in the organization, choose fearlessly. And we can't do all to all with all. So we are using this moment also to learn how we prioritize as we continue to live into our mission of powering global travel for everyone, everywhere. So that is what I've seen our cultural journey and our reaffirmation of our values has driven for us.
Wow, thank you very much, Arch, for not only sharing that, but really breaking it down what goes behind the scene. I think often when we hear those announcements, hey, we've done this, but we're like, hey, just so you know, there's a lot that goes behind it. And I want to circle back now to Deanne because oh man, this particular past year, on top of the pandemic, it was a key year for your organization because you have finally finished the 2-year merger of T-Mobile and Sprint. Congratulations. I know that was last year,
Thank
but
you.
still I get to say it. And I believe usually for something that big, there's a lot of celebration plans out. I mean, we usually take a lot of time of planning and all of us had to flip last minute. So tell me a little bit more. That must have not been easy. And on top of that, I know from what I understand from Spring Valley, in-person engagement is really important. I mean, all of us it is, but especially for a tech brand, it's uniquely part of your trait. So how do you translate that online when you can't do that? I can't shake hands with my customer anymore.
Yeah, well, first it was really hard for everybody. I wouldn't say this is just our story, but I don't want to assume that you know the story of T-Mobile and Sprint. But to be brief, we've been working for years. Most difficultly in the last couple of years prior to close, which occurred of all times in April of 2020. So this merger was years in the making and probably one of the largest mergers in history. And we had been preparing. We had playbooks of exactly what we were going to do and when for our customers, for our employees. We had these plans that were tested and documented and retested, and we were so ready to go. We were so excited. And from a culture and value perspective, we had events and training, all kinds of activities to really help bring the culture of these two companies coming together to life. And then think about April of 2020. It was about 2 to 3 weeks into the pandemic where most companies were closing doors and we were all starting to send our people home to work in their kitchens and their basements. So quickly, from a company and from an HR perspective, we basically had to rethink everything that we'd been planning, this really thoughtfully built playbook, and we had to do it really fast. I'll start with some of our frontline organizations, our customer care centers. They literally pulse with the heartbeats of our customers, and they're amazing cultural examples of one of our values, which is it's not just customer service; it's really about customer love. We had to close those. We had to wrap up all the equipment and get technology packed, and we had to send these employees that are used to working together as teams to solve really difficult customer issues, and they went home to isolation. And then our retail stores, man, we all remember those early days of retail. And goodness knows how much we spent on masks and hand sanitizer and cleaning products. But we had to stay open because our values reminded us that, again, we don't just do customer service, we do customer love. And if you think about during the pandemic, connectivity to our schools, our teachers, our jobs, our friends, our family, there was nothing more important, and our customers needed us. And so in some cases, remember, we could only have a couple of customers in the store at any one point in time. And so, our employees were so creative, they would set out tents outside so that they could service customers outside so they could get what they need and do so quickly. And then in some cases, we even turned some of our stores into little call centers while our care teams were transitioning and settling in from home. And so it was a really interesting and challenging time. And in our back office and our support organizations, we had to build bridges, build relationships with people that many of us had never even met in person. And we were meeting each other and working together now for 18 plus months via these little 2-inch WebEx screens. And we just had a massive shift from both companies that, as you mentioned, Monica, were very in person and heavily relationship driven to all very video technology based. And there were no more meetings after the meetings, and we would just hit end meeting, join meeting all day long. But in an odd and a good way for a lot of our back office people, it kind of all leveled the playing field, despite where your office was, or if you got more FaceTime with one group or another. We were all remote and we were all learning these things, and many of us were figuring all of this out for the first time. So I could go on, and we all know how incredibly unpredictable the past 18 months have been. But I'll tell you, our values have really led us through what I would say is probably the most difficult, but also some of the most rewarding times around our value of customer obsession, acting as one team together. We had to figure things out as a team, dream big and deliver, and doing things the right way always, and never stopping. So this has been our first year plus as what we like to call a new and better company.
Wow, Dan, thank you very much for sharing behind the scene. And again, I know when we think about retail, Tanya's going to have a lot of insights to share as well. But, I really appreciate you breaking that down because, again, I think there's so much behind the scene, and especially where every single one of you sit, that other folks really don't know the weight of each decision making. You're impacting thousands of people, not just your employees, your customers, stakeholders. And I know many of our listeners here who are joining us right now, they're probably thinking about like, geez, right, how is each decision making influencing? But Tanya, first, I'm really pumped because on top of all the decision making you're doing, you had to start this new role. Congratulations. Really excited. We're so lucky to have you as well. And let's dive into fashion because, man, fashion is a space, the space where in person is so crucial. Wait, literally from beginning to end, like the sketch, the fashion shows, like, I watch my life still, and then the shopping experience. Now that's completely gone. So what do we do? Like, are there things that like maybe perhaps this from this remote time that we've learned that you think will carry? Like, how are creatives doing with their mental well-being? Like, I know it's not the same. So please tell me a little bit more what you've learned and what maybe others keep in mind, because we're all creatives in our different spaces, but especially in your space, I think this time has not been easy. So how do we do this? And how do we transition into a new role remotely? 100%.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you for the questions because I have no answer for you yet to tell you how to do it successfully. I think this is a learn, baptism by fire type of thing. I will say, and it's not dissimilar to what Deanne just mentioned about retail. When I was in my old role, I was still the president of Jimmy Choo when COVID happened, and Jimmy Choo is part of Capri Holdings, which is Jimmy Choo, Michael Kors, and Versace. So quite a large retail network globally. And, it's interesting because the fashion industry is split into two different types of spaces. One is retail, right? So the people who are on the front lines, who are actually in the stores, who are providing the experience, the selling experience. But then the other part of it, who are also, the other half of the team that's super, super, super important, are the creatives. And from if you think about other companies, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but if you're looking at law firms, or if you're looking at doctors, or you're looking at, other companies where you don't necessarily have people who are creatives who have to produce a new collection every single season that you thereby have to sell, right, and create revenue and income. So I think for the creative piece of the business, I think it was really difficult in the beginning. I mean, just like everyone who's talked before me, having to go home to your house, your apartment, whatever, and sit there on your own, basically, or with your family, and trying to be creative and have that process, right? And understand what's inspiring you at that time to come up with the next collection, whether it's shoes or handbags or even ready to wear. So I think for creatives, what was interesting last year, we all left to go home in March, I believe it was. And really in about June is when a lot of the creative teams started coming back to the office because they just honestly couldn't handle being at home anymore. They didn't have that human interaction. They didn't have any type of inspiration. And it was really jarring for people. And I think we all know for everyone, and we're seeing this today, mentally, it's just been a huge challenge, whether you're creative, whether you're an analyst, whether it doesn't matter. It is just such a huge shift. And I always say it's one of the greatest human experiments of all time, just to see what happens when you put us all in a box and how we react. Some of us, can turn it around and things flourish and things are great. And a lot of great creative things come out of that. And on the other hand, it's very, very difficult for a lot of people. So I will say that the creative part of the business, the design part of the business, and the same in my new role at Mackage, they came back really in, June or July in the summer so that they could, fit garments, they could come up with concepts, and they have to be together, right? And obviously in a very safe way. So there's that piece of it. But then there's the other piece of it that just was the most devastating, I think, for all of us, probably almost everyone on this call, is the retail piece. So I think it was the end of March last year, we had to furlough all of our employees. No one knew when we were going to open stores again. And, 100% of our revenue is sales, right? Is so. And at that time, the double whammy was, yes, of course, we all have, jimmychoo.com, mackage.com. We all have our e-commerce websites. But at that time, none of us were shopping because none of us knew what was going to happen because it was such an unprecedented time. So, that in itself, from a management perspective, having to furlough your entire team and say, hey, guys, sorry, we're not going to be opening the stores. We don't know when we'll be opening the stores. And, I think this goes back to the original conversation about being able to have a team who understands, who can pivot, and who is open to change. If you're not open to change during this time, it's a really, really, really difficult thing to overcome because none of us know, right? We don't know what's going to happen another month from now. So I think initially with the furlough, and then once all of that happened, I guess we were about 3 months into COVID. That's when, then it was like, okay, everything's going to be okay, we think. So how do we safely start opening stores again? How do we safely start interacting with our clients again? And that's where a lot of really great things came to play creatively from a commercial or financial standpoint, like from my team more, in terms of the sales piece of it. And, it was like, okay, how do we bring Jimmy Choo to you? How do we bring Jimmy Choo to your house, right? Versus people going to stores. And we bought a Jimmy Choo van and we had a driver and, we had VIP experiences and really tried to bring some kind of happiness back into this industry, which is really based on people being happy and people being excited about products. So, there was a lot of creativity. I think my teams at Jimmy Choo did an amazing job pivoting and regrouping, and e-commerce obviously had a huge increase as a result of that because people had a lot of time at home, so they learned how to shop. And then, I think for me, the most difficult piece has been this transition into a new role during COVID, because you're meeting people the way we're meeting today. So you see a tiny little version of someone, and then you go to the office and you meet them and they're wearing masks and you don't know who's who because you haven't actually met the person. So you see someone's eyes and you kind of think you know who they are. So that part in itself is another whole test of my memory and trying to see if I can, going back to kindergarten of, one of these things is not like the other type of things. But it's really interesting because you have to form some type of connection. And we are back in the office and it's exciting. But I probably would, I don't think transitioning to be a CEO in a new company during a pandemic is necessarily the best idea from a getting to know people and human interaction. Probably not the best strategy, but it's a great opportunity and I'm super happy to be here. And, like I said, we're in the office, we're traveling again. So once I get to spend more FaceTime with people, I think that will be a really good thing. And I think that, in all of our businesses that we talked about today, I think retail is in a much better place than we were a year ago. E-commerce is a much better place a year ago. And I think we're all finally kind of taking a bit of a sigh of relief and getting back to where life was. But that is because we have amazing teams who are able to pivot and who are able to react to change.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And again, I think we're circling back to the very first reminder way back when Anne shared about how important culture is, not only just in, the statement that you have in the wall. It's what defines your people, how people show up, as Deeanne said, how, your customer, how the team, wherever they're in the front line to the back staff making decisions, are sharing that, hey, if it's not working, how do we go back to the drawing board and take a look? And so really honored. I know other folks who are chiming in and listening right now, there's probably tons of notes that they're taking. And I want to circle back to you because, what Tanya has built upon briefly on that last point, which I agree, is that, hey, one thing that we want to be mindful as problem solvers and, innovators is that how do we think forward? Okay, so it has been tough. We've made here so far. We're still learning. We're figuring out, but what should we look forward to? Thinking about each of your different industries, and if I can maybe start with you, I'm curious, is there new things that you think we're going to now look forward to really honing and appreciating more in culture and people because of everything that we learned here? And anything in particular in pharma that you're really excited about to see more?
Yeah, the answer is I hope so. I think what we've been through the last 18 months has provided a platform for change that we've not seen, at least up to this point in my 30-year career. And good leaders, this is like such a great opportunity to make an impact. It's just ripe for new ideas and for innovation. And I'm a big fan. One of our corporate values is inclusion. We're an innovation company, and so we believe that an inclusive culture and work environment drives innovation. Innovation drives new ideas drive transformative medicines to help patients in solving for diseases that we have. And so we spent a lot of time there. The pandemic was almost, Monica, an accelerator for us. We took that opportunity to really pull those values through, and on the inclusion value especially, we invested a lot of time with our leaders and managers to say, Tanya, you spoke to it, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and everyone's looking for a voice of reason. Who do you trust? Who do you listen to? Who will guide us? And we said, step into that void. Talk about not only listening to what your team is experiencing, but talk about how you're feeling. And we really encourage the vulnerability and the authenticity and the humanity piece of this that I think really helped our organization. It stripped away the hierarchy. Our boxes are all the same size. Our dogs are all running in the background. Our kids are all yanking on our arms. Like, that was gone. And if there's one thing that I think is important as we go forward and as we start to return to our offices, we're bringing our U.S. workforce back in October here in a few weeks. We've been back on a volunteer basis since June. If there's one thing I hope we can take forward is that we don't fall back into our comfort zone. We don't put on those comfortable coats, that we continue to show vulnerability and authenticity. That garners followership and trust. And like I said in my earlier example with our bold PBRG, they felt safe to step forward and say, you're messing this up, we can help. Let us help you. Let us review your materials for clinical trials, because they're all white people and you wonder why. It's 80%. Like, help us do some basic things. And, if we didn't have that inclusive culture, they wouldn't have felt safe. And so I think that's so very critical to driving the change that's, quite frankly, bigger than any one of us. It's so important in the collaboration that we do.
Absolutely. And you said one of my favorite words, which is psychological safety. And again, if we don't feel psychologically safe, which is being able to show up as who we are, how we really feel, no matter who we are, then we're not bringing our 100% creative ideas or different opinions or any form. So thank you, Ann, for sharing that and how we have to really be intentional. Deeanne, I want to build on this because, again, tech is another space. All of us are changing. And you mentioned about the power of connectivity. Do you think the way we may perhaps train, and you've already shared a little bit about how much care you're putting into the training and your people development too. Tell me a little bit more. How is the tech changing in how we think about culture and people, and any lessons that you want to walk away with as well?
Yeah, I think very similar to Anne. This was a time and will be a time for us to really accelerate our innovation for our customers. We learned a lot. I loved Tanya's story about retail and kind of reinventing how you do retail. And I think a lot of us have learned a lot in the last 18 months that we're trying to figure out, both for our stores and for our care centers and even for our office spaces, how to take those things that we learned that we like, that we want to make sure we accelerate and do more of as we return to these offices in our new, better normal. We're actually calling it our new, better normal. And then how do we make sure, to Ann's point, that we don't go back to some of those bad habits that we might have had before? One of the things that we've really spent a lot of time on as we return to our offices, very similar to Ann, we've been on a voluntary basis since June. We are now welcoming our employees back into the office spaces on a very regular basis. And one of the things that we learned in the pandemic was, we want to see you, but we don't need to see you every minute of every day. And we want to offer flexibility for our people. So we've implemented lots of different hybrid work options for folks so that we can kind of meet them where they are. And when you're in the spaces, we're actually using the spaces to do the things that lift up and reinforce what's important to us, how we come together as a team, how we obsess over our customers, which again are rooted in our values.
Thank you, Deanne. Again, the key reminder again, if anyone is not getting why culture, people, and taking the time to craft all of that is so, so crucial. And again, I know having that clarity is the reason why you can share that confidently. Like, this is how we know we can head forward, even if we don't know what's going to happen. Tanya, building on this, as you were speaking about fashion, with all the creative decision making, and all of us are creative problem solvers in that, but particularly in the arts and crafts that you just mentioned, I also wonder, how you find talent is probably changing during this time. Any new ways that you want to share, as well as what changes are you excited in the fashion industry as a result of this time that we can carry the lessons with us?
I think that's a great question. I think that change is exciting overall, right? I mean, if you embrace change, 9 out of 10 times, good things come from change. From a recruiting standpoint, I think this is still kind of a at work process. And what I mean by that, and we're finding, and I don't know if anyone else on this call is finding, but I'm seeing it in other industries like the hotel industry and the travel industry, even myself traveling, restaurants. It's hard to find people. I think a lot of people today have taken a really hard look at their life and said, look, like I used to get on a plane and go to Milan for a meeting for a day, or I would fly to Japan for 2 days for a meeting. And it wasn't even a thought process. You just did it, right? So I think this time has given a lot of us time to reflect and to understand what's important. And I think a lot of people today are also struggling with the fact that we do need to be nimble. We do need to have different types of work options, flexibility, but at the same time, we still have a business to run, right? So there's that catch-22, and like I said to you, I have two pieces. Not only is it a global business that I'm managing today. So you have, Canada is different than the US, which is different from Europe, which is different than Asia. So you have the cultural piece, and then in addition to that, you do still have people who, whether it's retail, whether it's restaurant workers, et cetera, that simply are not interested in that career anymore. So we're finding a real challenge in finding talent and people who want to go back to working, 10 to 6 in a store, or so I think right now, maybe as the dust settles, maybe and listen, again, this isn't a criticism, this is just an observation in multiple countries. All of our governments allowed us to have government subsidies, and people were able to get checks, which is amazing, and helped everyone because everyone needed help at that time. But when you get to a simple financial equation where your subsidy check versus your hourly wage in a retail store, in a restaurant, because you're working on commission or you're earning tips, it's not an easy decision to make. So then that begs the question, so what happens with our minimum wage? What happens with how we compensate people that work on the front lines? And I mean, retail employees, hotel, restaurant, et cetera. So right now, I think we're going through a huge learning curve to understand how we attract talent and what are those flexible options, whether it's retail, whether it's corporate, that can attract top talent. And I do think that it's flexibility. I do think that incentives are hugely important. But this is really a different time. This isn't a time of, hey, when I grow up, I want to work in a retail store or just have a summer job and do that. It's. I feel like we've really everything's really changed, and I think everyone's looking at how they see their work-life balance, which I think is not a bad thing, because we didn't really have one before, especially in the U.S. So I think this is still a TBD, or to be continued. And just trying to figure out what those balances are that we can offer people, and then that's part of our culture and part of our brand, right? So that we're all kind of in that same boat, and that we do respect people's time. And it's just a really interesting time to try and navigate that piece of the business. And I know, because I mean, just watching, if you watch the news from a logistics standpoint, today I have product that's sitting on container ships in the California harbor, and in a line of 20 other container ships that is 3 months late. Why? Because we don't have anyone to unload the containers. So this is not just retail employees. This is a whole knock-on effect. And I'm sure everyone's hearing this as you watch the news every day. And it's every single, from Nike to Lululemon to anyone, right? I mean, so there's a lot of workforce challenges I think we're going to continue to endure until the dust settles and we can see, what's left and how we then tackle that piece of it.
Thank you, Tanya. I mean, again, you reminded us that, hey, just because we feel like we just reached a certain point doesn't mean the problem solving finished. And how do we always stay nimble, agile, look forward, and constantly say, okay, we might have solved this, but like what else is still not solved? And how do we continue to, as you said, actually see TBD as a good thing? And again, I think this goes back to every single one of you reminding us this is where culture, people, and having that clarity is really important. Arch, as a result, then building on that, I mean, as somebody who had to really reframe again values and culture during this time even more deeply, do you feel like there might be particular values that will be even more popular and like people would want? Like, if so, like what would that be? And curious, what are you excited to see in the travel industry in particular?
So I'll just build upon what was discussed earlier in terms of what we hope to see. So this increased attention on inclusive workplaces, sense of well-being, etc. I'm hoping and expecting that our attention as organizations, as leaders, as individuals on well-being becomes a cornerstone of well-being and performance being two sides of the same coin, and really thinking about well-being in a holistic way of social well-being, personal well-being, financial well-being, mental well-being, etc., and build that sense of community. And as we also have chosen to create hybrid workplaces wherein people have flexibility to come in and work together on certain days and others. And we build rituals that are more meaningful than just coming to an office every day. So, how you come in, what kind of gatherings are important, and how do you create a sense of belonging as part of those gatherings? And we are in 58 countries, and you have to constantly think about that coming to an office must have a meaning, and working alone individually must have a meaning. And how do we create these stronger focus on planning these gatherings, maintaining these rituals that create that connective tissue of a sense of belonging, while also giving people focused time to do deep work? We are in technology, and a lot of our people code, and they need that focused time. And how do you create the focused time, which has the flexibility? Do it where you will. So I'm hoping as we continue to live into, I think I called it the new better normal. I think of it as it's the new where we are headed and how we adapt. The sense of well-being and performance don't become an either or. They are all about the and how do we create a sense of well-being and performance and create an integration through that. So that is what we are working through as we think about it. And our values just drive us as we think about every choice we make. For example, most recently, we think vaccination and science has a big role to play in terms of creating safe and healthy places to return. We ourselves participated in giving the world a shot campaign for a whole month where travelers can contribute to create vaccine access in certain countries with UNICEF. So I think our values guide us into, again, focusing on how do we create a safe and healthy places to work where people are connecting and where people can broaden their horizons. So this is how I'm hopeful as we get into the coming year, and the next year is our attention and consciousness around well-being and performance continues.
Well, Arch, thank you very much. You shared another favorite word of mine, which is how do we see everything from the lens of abundance mindset. If we see it from that lens, yes, we might feel stuck in certain things. We might feel like, I don't know how to solve this and my container's stuck somewhere and like I can't find my people, but we'll figure out. But that's what, again, going back to the core thing, helps when you have your culture and people defined and really going back and self-reflecting. So again, as we're doing it, I'm really excited. I agree with every single one of what you shared and how important well-being holistic is going to be. One of my favorite thing as we final wrap up in the next few minutes is I love to ask if you can share final notes as a question, as a gift. So while we're all here on screen, we'd love to ask each one of you, what is one question you recommend all leaders to ask more, or maybe reflect more on, to foster really this workplace for all, as we're all figuring out to build this workplace online. So maybe Arch, if I can start with you, and then Deeanne, Tanya, and Ann.
We continue to ask the question, what would be most useful to you in all our interactions?
Deeanne?
Yeah, I think I would encourage every leader to make sure we're always asking people how they are doing. If anything we've learned in the last year and a half is the mental health challenges are real. Several of us have touched on that. And I think it's important that we don't just assume that we know what's been going on in people's lives for the last 18 months. So how are you doing?
Tanya.
So just to not be repetitive, but to add on to the same two things, and also, for me is what tools can I give you? Like we had a toolbox before COVID, but what does that new toolbox look like to help you be successful? Because I think exactly, what everyone has said, that there's the mental piece of it, but there's also the, I need to do my job piece of it, and whether it's having more options of flexibility. So it's really, what is that new toolbox that can help you be successful, and how can we help you get there? I mean, I think it's the same message from everyone, but it's not only a work toolbox, but it's a mental toolbox, right, as well, because that might mean working from home 2 days a week. Yeah.
And the final piece.
Yeah, I'll build on the ask piece. I would say listen and demonstrate that you care.
And so with that, thank you all very much for joining us and giving us a few extra seconds. This was such a treat. Please reach out to all of us so that if you have any other questions, but thank you again for joining us at this event. I hope the rest of the day is a treat, and we look forward to seeing you soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.